Alright guys, welcome to Formula 1 News. Red Bull have stated that Yuki Tsunoda will get the rest of the season in the RB21 alongside Max Verstappen, but does anyone actually believe them after the chaos over the last 2 rounds? The fact that Max will have had 3 different teammates in the span of 4 races from Abu Dhabi 2024 at the end of last season with Perez, then Lawson, and then of course Yuki Tsunoda from Japan onwards. Will he get the rest of the year? Who else could they call up if it goes wrong for Yuki again? Or at that point, surely Red Bull have to look internally for the issues that they themselves have caused. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I greatly appreciate it. We'll come back to the livery on screen here in a second. I just wanted to start with this. So Valtteri Bottas today was a McLaren driver for once. Now he's driving a Mercedes engine still, but he is one of their kind of reserves this season. McLaren have a couple of options out there, but Bottas is acting in that role as well as for Mercedes. And he actually got the chance to do a test in the McLaren today. And this, of course, is the circuit de Barcelona Catalunya. You can tell by, well, I mean, the track's pretty obviously obvious to me, but also it says Barcelona very blatantly in the background and Catalonia all over the grandstand. So yeah, an interesting test for Bottas today. Just interesting to note really why this is happening. It helps the drivers keep like their super license points, I think, doing some of these testing miles, but also the teams, they can't use their current drivers for too much mileage. If they want to do testing mileage in the car around circuits like Barcelona, they're only allowed to do a certain amount of kilometers with their actual drivers. So they need to use other drivers, other resources. Bottas got the opportunity. I thought that was pretty interesting to note. But let's talk about this livery, right? Because today it's been the big talk of the town about whether Red Bull are going to go back to the White Bull livery, the famous Turkey livery, which was intended, right, for Japan with the Honda partnership. And today Red Bull did the following, right? You can see the Japanese in their name. You can see their logo. They changed it to white on red, and I think it was pretty clear here what they were going for. And we've got, I wouldn't say confirmation, at least as of recording the video, but we do have reputable Red Bull, I wouldn't say affiliated, but you know, when it comes to Red Bull stuff, Thomas Maher is pretty on point, and he said the following: Red Bull is set to race with a bespoke white livery a la the RB16B at next weekend's Japanese Grand Prix. It was rumoured now for a couple of days, and it now seems like this is what they are going to do. Now, lots of people have been talking about this from various angles, one of which being that the livery got so much traction on the Racing Bulls this year because it's very similar, of course, to that famous Red Bull RB16B special White Bull livery. This year's Racing Bull is pretty similar, and it's considered by many to be the best livery on the grid. Now, Red Bull are going to run back something presumably similar, but it's going to be a bit confusing to fans because there's going to be 4 cars, you would think, that look roughly the same on the grid. So I don't really know what that's going to look like, especially because it's not like the 2 Racing Bulls are going to be lining up P16, P17, and the 2 Red Bulls are going to be P1, P2. Actually telling the difference between the cars could be a serious challenge, and as some have suggested, maybe they're just going to line up with 4 Racing Bulls and hope that nobody notices that anything has changed. They do say the livery will be somewhat different, but some have even suggested, well, maybe in addition to Red Bull doing a special white livery, Racing Bulls should do a special Red Bull, like, I don't know, concept livery, where they actually go dark blue, and the cars kind of swap liveries for the race, and then everyone gets on with things as normal when it comes to Bahrain. But yeah, doubt either of those things are necessarily going to happen. Apparently it's going to be kitted out with a completely white livery with the Red Bull logo on the engine cover painted in red, with minor blue accents featuring towards the front and the rear of the car. So with that in mind, it's not going to look exactly the same as the older one did. You guys can see at the top here. So apparently it's going to be fully white with the Red Bull on, its usual place, presumably, on the engine cover painted in red with minor blue accents. So, I mean, do we not have minor blue accents on this car as well? So, it sounds to me the liveries are going to be incredibly similar. I guess we'll see what they turn up with in Japan. It's a cool sign, especially because it's the final Red Bull race with Honda in Japan. It makes sense. It also makes even more sense maybe now why Yuki's in the car, because Red Bull can say all they want about the reasons why they've done this. And oh, Yuki, way better than we thought he was, somehow, even though he's been the same driver now for at least 12 months. And Lawson, nowhere near, was never going to turn it around. We'll get to those comments in a second because they keep talking about it, Red Bull, and they keep digging the hole a little bit deeper as far as I'm concerned. But on a weekend where Honda are probably going to pay Red Bull a pretty sizable chunk of change to get Yuki in the car, maybe it makes sense in the context of them having a special livery as well. I imagine this was planned. I don't think this was necessarily a last-minute idea that they've just said, oh, well, to steady the ship, Honda pay us some more money, we'll run a white livery. I think this was probably in the works for some time, but it's certainly been rumoured about for a couple of days now, and now we think it's actually going to be happening, which is pretty exciting. But obviously, if the car's not very good still, then it will be a little underwhelming, especially if there are Racing Bulls and Red Bulls in the mix with each other. Who's going to be able to tell Lawson and Yuki apart on the track? It potentially is going to be a serious challenge. Lawson said the following: being a Red Bull racing driver has been my dream since I was a kid. It's what I've worked towards my whole life. It's tough, but I'm grateful for everything that's brought me to this point. Everyone who stood by me. Thank you for the world, and it means the world, obviously, for your support. Even Jos Verstappen, can you believe it, made a comment in reply and said, I hope you go on to do a fantastic job. You deserve to be in Formula 1. Now, I'm not saying Jos's perspective necessarily echoes what Max thinks, but Red Bull even admitted today that Max is not a happy man about the way that things are currently being handled, and that maybe shouldn't be a massive surprise for a number of different reasons. But Red Bull, again, they come up with some fascinating statements on this. For example, this one from Marko: Yuki was too inconsistent, that's why we unanimously decided in favour of Lawson. But hang on a second. So after 2 Grand Prix, it's been enough to show that Lawson doesn't have the mental resilience to hack it, and it's shown that Yuki is now magically like the perfect man for the job. Yuki has improved. He's matured. He's obviously made steps over the last couple of seasons. But has he changed dramatically in the last 2 months to make him now suddenly deserving of the Red Bull seat that he was not previously? And Marko said this to the Telegraph: Liam lacks confidence now, and it's very difficult to turn it around. I think we are actually helping Liam with this. So again, they're pushing this whole we're doing it for Liam's best interest. And maybe on some level they feel like they are. But, it can't be good for the confidence of a driver to go through something like this. It's just another example of Red Bull just deeply mismanaging some of the talent resources they have, in my opinion. But Red Bull's belief seems to be that we did not expect him to have performed well in the upcoming races, and then the pressure would only increase. It is impossible to change a difficult car like the RB21 very quickly, but yesterday Verstappen had a very positive meeting with the engineers. So it's worth giving that a little bit more kind of discussion, really, because it is about the car. At the end of the day, part of this is about the fact that the car is difficult to drive. They were hoping that it wouldn't be. They were hoping Liam would be able to handle it. That's clearly not true. So, they think the Yuki is the best bet to try and give them some feedback, as we just talked about yesterday, to get them to a point where they have a car that's more drivable. I think the other nuance that's worth discussing, though, is that let's say they are putting Yuki in the car for the reason that he'll give better technical feedback, he's got more experience, and he will help Red Bull design a car that actually can be driven by someone that isn't Max Verstappen. The issue is, as the season goes on, it may become increasingly clear that the World Championship in the Constructors is out of reach, but in the drivers, maybe Max still has a chance. At which point, would Red Bull develop in favour of what Yuki might want, which may be what a more regular driver would desire from a car, which could, let's say, serve them better in the long run? Or they will develop in favour of Mr. Max Verstappen, who is on the verge of maybe crowning himself the world champion again. Are you going to bring upgrades that favour that, or are you going to look more long-term? If that's how Red Bull are approaching it, it's a challenge, but Red Bull, of course, have, on some level, dug their own grave. And the fact that Red Bull put Lawson in the car saying that he was super mentally resilient, and now they're saying that he's so broken and the pressure will only increase, I don't think they're doing him any favours. They say that they are, but then publicly they're kind of bashing him, right? Because they're saying that his mentality is weak. It's, he had 2 bad races and he's mentally cooked. It's I don't know if either of those things are necessarily true. Marko goes on to say the next few races are going to be challenging anyway. I also believe that if Liam didn't have as many technical issues and the car had been better to drive, this would have worked. It's easy to talk in hindsight, but we all have, all we have is now, including the shareholders, come to a decision that we've had to make this change. It's funny to see that we're experiencing a completely different Yuki this year. Does anyone really believe this? Has Yuki drastically changed in the last 3 months? He hasn't made any mistakes in the first few weeks. He's fast, he's under new management, and he's full of confidence. But he's been this way for some time. I just don't really get why Red Bull overlooked him in the first place. Maybe it doesn't work with Yuki, but I don't think there's much denying that he deserved the chance, which now he's getting, but he's getting it in tricky circumstances when he's had no time with his car, which he could have done had they made the decision earlier. We think his experience, he can help make the car better too, which is the big talking point we had yesterday. He's had his ups and downs, he's matured, he's become physically stronger as well. The racing Racing Bull is a very fast car in qualifying, a little less so in the races, but Tsunoda has already shown that he can leave a lot of experienced drivers behind him in that car. We will see next week, and it feels a bit ominous if you're Yuki Tsunoda hearing them talk in that way, because it doesn't work out what's going to happen next. Lawson is being told by Marko, no, we're not demoting you, we're simply moving you to Racing Bulls, which says a couple of things to Max on some level, because if Red Bull don't consider the move to Racing Bulls a demotion, what does it say about their own top team, right? Because on paper, you'd certainly want it to be a demotion, or certainly want it to feel like a demotion, but it doesn't really. People are saying, oh, poor Yuki, gets the chance to be demoted down to the more challenging team. But look, Marko said, Yuki's a completely different man this year. I rate Yuki very highly, but I'm like, what do they see in Yuki that's different now to what it previously was? But Marko also admitted that Max isn't happy about this. Marko's very open about these type of things, and Max clearly isn't happy with it. We've seen evidence of that over the last couple of days, and even Marko says this, we know that Max isn't happy, but we need 2 cars at the front, not only for the constructors, but also to help Max to win his 5th world title. The idea is to have Yuki up there as, a rear gunner. Then you can achieve strategically more in races. We can use Yuki's experience and form now. That counts. At the end of the day, it's an advantage to the team, and that also means to the advantage of Max. There's a couple of things here, right? They're putting Yuki in the car. They're telling Max, Yuki will be better than Lawson, which, I don't even know if that's true, but even if it turns out to be true, then it shows they made a massive mistake over the winter. In addition, they're going to say, look, Yuki brings more experience. He can help develop the car in a way that it's going to, make it better for both of you in the longer term without Verstappen kind of papering over many of the cracks. And because Yuki's going to be up there in the fight, he's going to be able to help you strategically. Is that true? Right? I'd love it to be true. I'd love Yuki to deliver. But is there much evidence to suggest that? Not necessarily. He is, however, apparently putting in some serious time in the sim. This guy, Daz, was in the replies to everyone over the last few days with the eyes emoji who were discussing the White Bull livery. So maybe he knows a thing or two about what's happening behind the scenes at Red Bull. And Marko said, it's going to be a difficult next few rounds. We saw that comment a little while ago. The next thing I wanted to discuss, though, and the big topic really is what happens next, because Yuki's going to have a tall order in Japan. There's no doubt about it. The pressure of the home fan base, the pressure of stepping into a Red Bull for the first time, the last time they're going to be in Japan with Honda, right, with a white livery, which is paying tribute to that organizational partnership, shall we say. A lot of pressure on Yuki's back. He's going to turn up to Q1 with probably a very tricky to drive car and is going to have to wring some serious performance out of it in a circumstance which is uncertain at a very challenging circuit, which is Suzuka. But Marko says Tsunoda will get until the end of the season to prove that he is the ideal teammate to Verstappen going forward. We believe that he can do the job. So, Red Bull are genuinely a hilarious team, because it wasn't long ago that they were saying the same thing about Lawson, right? Oh yeah, Lawson's the man. We're pretty sure that he can do the job. We're certain that he's the man. He's better than Yuki. He's got a higher ceiling than Yuki. 2 rounds in, they're like, actually, no, that's not true at all. Our bad guys. Actually, Yuki was the guy that we meant that about. And definitely Tsunoda can do the job, and he can be the ideal teammate to Verstappen. After years of trying to convince the fan base, they never felt like Yuki was the appropriate guy for the job, despite him seeming like their most promising driver in their program for years apart from the world champion himself. So apparently Yuki's going to get the drive for the rest of the year. This, to me, isn't surprising. I think this will actually happen in the context that they are trying to find a driver to help improve their car and develop in a way that somebody else can actually drive it if Max Verstappen was going to leave. In the context of that, I actually do think Yuki will stay. Kind of irrelevant of his performance, but obviously performance is going to be somewhat relevant. I also think that even from a Verstappen perspective, certainly from a fan base perspective, I know that Red Bull don't really care what people think about them, but could they do it again, right? If they drop Yuki for Hadjar, they drop Yuki for Iwasa, they drop Yuki for, I don't know, they call up Pato Award or something. Please, McLaren, let him come and save us. And Zach Brown would probably tell him some serious words down the phone. But you know what I'm saying, right? It's surely Red Bull can't do it again. Tsunoda made a big step. It's strange after 4 years. Now in his 5th year, he has a much stronger personality. He has more confidence, and he did 2 very good races. It's just his strategy didn't work at Racing Bulls. In this case, a very difficult car experience is something that will help. These were our thoughts. So, yeah, it's still fascinating. And Tsunoda is trading what seems like an easy easier car to drive, but a horrifically bad strategy team for what seems like a horrifically difficult car to drive, but an excellent strategy team at Red Bull. So there's pros and cons to both departments, but Racing Bulls for years have had the worst strategy on the grid. They honestly do put Ferrari to shame. They just don't quite get as much credit as Ferrari do. And, you know, some further comment on Lawson that he didn't have his normal self-confidence. We were basically worried that his confidence was cooked and he was never going to be able to recover, and you know, his career will start again at Racing Bulls. It's yeah, just Red Bull things, I suppose. But they are saying that Yuki is going to get until the end of the year. Do we believe them at Red Bull? It's a matter for serious debate, because after what's happened in recent years, you wouldn't put anything past them, right? Nick de Vries was gone not long ago. Daniel Ricciardo was gone not long ago. Gasly, Albon, among plenty of others, Kvyat, over the last few years. Is Tsunoda going to get the test of time? On some level, it's going to be performance dependent. If he's P20 every weekend, like, you know, it's the time is going to be called. And at that point, they may just say, yep, well, unlucky Yuki, we knew you couldn't do it. And we're just going to kick you straight out of the organisation entirely. No return even to Racing Bulls. Although, of course, their current comments would very much come back to bite them at that point. So if I had to put money on it, I would say that Yuki's going to get the rest of the year. I don't think Red Bull are going to do this again. I don't think they make this decision lightly, and I would expect that's what they're going to do for Tsunoda. But I mean, this is Red Bull Racing. Anything can happen, and it feels like I'm making a hot take. Like, how am I making a hot take that their driver will last the season? Like that, it feels like a really hot take right now that Tsunoda isn't going to go anywhere. But that's what I'm going to go with. I think Yuki's going to do a good enough job that they can stick with it, and he delivers good enough performances to be acceptable. And even if they're not great, there's a recognition from Red Bull that they need a guy like Yuki to help them develop in the right direction going forwards, and I guess time will tell. But I think he's earned this opportunity. The other thing that Yuki will have to show is that he can be a good teammate for Max in the longer term. Perez was, you know, I wouldn't say a lapdog, but like he didn't really cause many issues with Max. Only on various occasions that was particularly an issue. I think the concern with Yuki, and probably the reason why they put Lawson in the car on some levels, there was a feeling that Tsunoda in the Red Bull would, you know, be a bit too feisty, right? Try and mix it up with Max, try and win the Drivers' Championship on his own right. The fact that Yuki is starting in his third race of the season, he's already, you know, behind Max in terms of points. So, you know, Yuki is not thinking about winning the Drivers' Championship. He's trying to get in a position where maybe they could fight for the Constructors. So I think it takes a bit of the pressure off Yuki in that sense. And maybe Yuki, if he can just kind of accept that he just needs to do the job that Red Bull want of him this season, and then maybe going forwards, then he could be a bit more aggressive if they decide to keep him on. I think that's kind of a key point as well, is that if Yuki, you know, starts getting a bit too feisty with Max, which was one of the fears I think I would say of Red Bull over the last few years, that will likely contribute to his downfall. But if they do get rid of him, who do they put in next? I mean, you know, it's a question that I don't even want to go there, to be perfectly honest. I know that some people are even throwing around the name, not seriously obviously, Yada Watman. If you guys ever watched the F1 esports, or they call it now like F1 Sim Racing Championship, like you probably will have a pretty good time watching it. I mean, it's F1, it's on the F1 game, it's not the most like competitive game ever in terms of racing, but it is entertaining because like there is some chaos in that championship because it's all equal cars. Everyone is hella tight in terms of performance, and Yada Watman, Dutch driver, won the World Championship as of yesterday with Red Bull, the team that he moved to last year. Was at Mercedes for a couple of years. But yeah, so I don't know, I just thought I'd mention it because it was a big story of F1 yesterday, because the final race at Abu Dhabi with Thomas Ronhart making some questionable dive bombs was certainly a conversation point. Some of you will have no idea what I'm talking about, some of you will. So we're going to leave it there for today. Very much intrigued to your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.